And welcome back to Open Your Eyes, and we are about to jump on into our first segment. Actually, it will be two segments. Frequently asked questions on the ICJ, on the referendum, on the information on a whole. And we've got these guys in. Actually, we've got Ambassador Alexis Rosado in, who is the head of the Referendum Unit, and Dylan Vernon, Belize's ambassador to Belgium. Guys, good morning. It's so nice to have you in, and welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
It's a Wednesday.
Good morning, Belize. Yes.
And very bright and nice outside.
Definitely.
Even if you're half asleep.
Definitely. So the topic is all over the place. Like I mentioned, taking a jog yesterday with one of my colleagues, the topic was the ICJ, getting into the gym, lifting some weights. ICJ. Everybody's talking
Isn't that
about
amazing?
It is amazing.
Last year about this time, nobody wanted to talk about the ICJ.
Would you say it's because it's actually right around the corner? Would you say that?
Yes, and really it's something that we should have been doing more often, a long time ago, but it's good that people are tuned in. And, people are asking questions, they're researching by themselves, and by the time you reach to them, they are prepared with a whole ton load of questions to throw at you, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So let's get on into the fact that you guys have been all across the country. You've been to villages, you've been rural, urban, keys. What's people's mindset as we speak? What's the the question that is most asked right now, just a few days out from referendum day?
The question that I get most of all is, how would our chances be should we end up in court? People don't want to lose anything. And you expect that because, you know, everybody loves this country, and whether you're for the yes or for the no, we all have this passion for this country. We love this country, and nobody wants to see ill for Belize. So whether you're genuine for the yes, genuine for the no, we all want the same thing, and we all realize we'll be in the same boat together, whether we get a yes or no at the referendum. And the important thing is that whatever decision we make on the 10th of April, it will be the right decision. And I think that is a sort of pressure that individuals feel upon themselves when they're making the decision. Some have already made up their minds for the yes or the no, but others who have not made up their minds are battling it in their mind because they keep hearing about it, and they want to be sure that whatever decision they make is the right decision for Belize.
For you, just before I get to Mr. Vernon, one of the things that you mentioned there, whatever decision we make is the right decision. Now you know that Belizeans will be holding you to that, right? Whatever decision you make is the right decision.
Right?
Belizeans will be holding you to that.
Belizeans will be holding all of us to that, because at the end of the day, it's all of us in the same boat, you know. This is not about me, about Ambassador Vernon, about you, about Marilyn. It's about the whole country. It's about our future as a country.
Yeah.
We will not be here to live out the consequences of whatever decision we make, because the decision is a very big decision.
Yeah.
The last time we had such a big decision was 1798, when they had to take a vote, and the gentleman from Flowers Bank came and turned the voting, and then in 1981 again, Belizeans were divided about going to independence. At the end of the day, the decision was that we will proceed whether or not the Guatemala claim is resolved. And we knew we had it over our head. Sorry?
I said that one didn't go to vote though.
Well, the vote was the general election before that, because one party was saying postpone it, wait till we resolve the claim, and the other one was saying no, independence
So
now.
there had to be a decision and a mandate, go to independence or not. And so this big decision is similar in scope in our political history, existential in that way. And to add to what Ambassador Rosado said, there has been a very intense campaign, especially over the past 6 months or so by the referendum office. And it's not only Ambassador Rosado and I mean, there's a team of people. I think we would estimate it at like some 30 people or so who are going over the country, doing presentations, and just in presentations alone, that is direct contact with people. There have been over 300, reaching almost 35,000 people directly over the past year, and a good one-third of
My
that.
last count was 500, over 500
Over
presentation
500, you
across
say?
the board. Wow.
And that's only presentations.
But some of them are to small groups in
they have
organizations
different
and
sizes,
villages.
different
An
sizes.
average of
Different
79, 80 people per group. But that is outside of talk shows and the materials we share and even delivering materials house to house. So there's been an intense, comprehensive campaign just on the facts that I think has been the most comprehensive on this issue since independence. So a lot is happening. Clearly, there could always be more, but we are getting a sense that people are really tuning in. The amount of requests we get at the office for just to go to present to groups on a daily basis, we have multiple. Right now, as we speak, people are going in their various districts doing presentations.
So it seems that from what I hear you saying is that you're doing the legwork. You're trying to get out as far as possible. And we know that is the role of what the Referendum Unit should be doing in executing its education campaign. I want to get right into one of the main criticisms that we hear of the Referendum Unit. And so getting out into villages, getting out into organizations is one thing. But delivering unbiased information is another. And we heard the foreign minister yesterday in the newscast speak of how he is convinced that the Referendum Unit is unbiased. But to be fair, you are aware of the fact that is a very common criticism that is made about this unit. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would invite anybody to go and sit into any of our presentations. The people who have sat in our presentations would tell you differently. I've heard people say that we are biased. If we're biased, it is towards the truth, towards the facts, and that's everybody who does presentations for us has that as their mandate. We don't go there to say yes, we don't go there to say no. And our PowerPoint presentations, we have standards, which of course each presenter could adjust it as they please, depending on the audience, depending on the time they have, but it's all facts. And anybody who wishes to challenge that are free to challenge it. But so far we have not had anybody contact us and tell us what you're saying there is not the truth. Nobody has done that.
There's a no camp out there, no advocates, and there are yes advocates. And sometimes when people look at what is being an ad or a billboard or something, they might not know who put it up there. Most of the time, these ads would have at the end paid for by so and so, and ours certainly do.
Some don't have it either.
Some don't have it, and that creates some confusion. But I think there's some who have put out this narrative, and falsely so, about the referendum office annual work, which we as professionals believe is doing what the government mandates us to do. Since 2012, actually, there was a cabinet mandate to do a public awareness campaign on this issue.
Now,
Bear in mind too that we have a referendum commission, and the referendum commission is not just a cross-party body, but also it has representation from members of civil society as well. And also we have to put to them, and the last meeting we had, we put to them, should we switch to a yes, should we switch to a no? That was actively discussed, and at the end of the day, after a really intense debate, and I think it was kind of evenly divided. The decision was that we should stick to just the facts.
and I think, to be fair, you can also present facts that are skewed to one perspective. I want to use one specific example. When you talk of ending the dispute, voting to end the dispute, that is a fact to going to court, because a no vote is not ending the dispute. And those are some of the billboards that we have seen present, sponsored by the Referendum Unit. So I want to go back and ask, since you have been under this particular criticism, have you shifted your presentation to focus on some of the alternative views? What happens if people vote no? What are some of the potential risks if you vote yes? Have those now been included in your presentation when you go out into the public?
Absolutely. In fact, part of our presentations, and I think most presentations, is looking at other options. Going back to negotiations, advisory opinion, doing nothing for a while and seeing what happens. These are options we put out there, including the ICJ option. And we're also responding to people's questions about what happens if you vote no, what happens if you vote yes. In fact, there are ads on this also on the media and on social media. So the answer is yes. So we do that.
I think some people are very upset when we say, you know, if you go the advisory opinion route, that will not solve the problem, because advisory opinions, by definition, do not settle disputes between countries. Some people get upset about us saying that, but it is the truth. And what can you do other than to say the truth is it will not settle the problem?
But
you know, if you continue negotiating, well, you know, Guatemala wants a piece of land. Are you willing to give away any piece of land? Of course, none of us is willing to give away of land. So what is there to negotiate having 60 odd years? Yeah. So we can continue
factual,
negotiating.
I think is the
we
key
can
thing.
continue negotiating, but this is what would result if you continue negotiating. People get upset when we say those things, but it is the fact. So yes, part of sticking to the truth is that you will get stoned and screamed and yelled at, and people will get upset at you, but it is the fact. And so we have to be unapologetic about sticking to the truth.
now I want to, you mentioned the advisory opinion, and I think, you know, the beauty of the referendum that's coming up on April 10th, as much as the mudslinging and all the accusations are being made, is that Belizeans have an opportunity to make the decision.
Right.
And when you talk of the advisory opinion, I hear very often from the Yes campaign, from the Referendum Unit, that it is not the best option for us. But we do hear from quite a few Belizeans that they feel it is the safest option for us. So for anyone who is not interested in taking a risk, an advisory opinion is kind of your test before to ensure that you have a solid case. What do you say to that?
Well, you want to be safe by going the route of not solving the problem. So the question is, do you want to solve the problem now by going to the ICJ? Or do you want to basically try other roads that will not settle it, and you will just keep like licking a wound but not really curing it? So that is the option Belizeans have. You
And
resolve
it's not so much that
resolve it now or not.
when we're asked these questions, we do not say you're wrong. I mean, people are entitled to ask valid questions and have their own opinions as to what are other options. But when we're asked about it in terms of what has happened with advisory opinions in the past, the facts are that they're not legally binding, and they do not resolve the situation of having a neighbor that claims you that does not recognize what you say your borders are. And that is a fact. I mean, that you cannot say it in another way except that this is the reality and this is the fact. And people take that as part of the information they have in making their decision as to whether to vote yes or no.
So there's nothing wrong in thinking it, you know. It's
Well-
okay if you feel that way. If you are risk averse in the sense that you feel it's safe, fine, but you need to understand what are the consequences and what follows
The
from
consequences of going for an advisory opinion.
Having been in negotiations, and I think that that's perhaps the only perspective we haven't been as the public exposed to, what it's like to sit in a room with Guatemalan officials and try to get an agreement. If Belizeans vote no come April 10th, what are the possibilities that you could get an agreement to go to the ICJ for an advisory opinion? From what you know, from your experience in negotiating.
You don't need to have an agreement with Guatemala to go for an advisory opinion. What you need to do is to get the agreement of the international community. So either the Security Council or the
United
General
Nations
Assembly.
General Assembly will have to
General
vote.
Assembly would have to, first of all,
Yeah.
we would have to start an entire lobbying campaign to convince the world that us having said no to go to the ICJ to settle the problem, we just want an advisory opinion. I think they would find it kind of strange to begin with. But then we would present a question that we would want to be answered, and then the whole international community would have to agree to that question, including Guatemala and including other friends that might say, you know what, you're wasting our time.
Because you need a resolution to go to the ICJ.
Yeah,
The-
so
the-
it's
the
not an
UN
automatic.
sends advisory opinions to the ICJ, not countries by special agreement.
Oh.
It goes through the
And-
United
It's
Nations.
not an automatic thing.
Okay.
It's not automatic.
And I hear what you're saying in terms of being able to rally the support of the international community, but Belizeans are going to give the mandate on April 10th. And,
Yeah,
and
of
your
course.
options, if there's a no, our options, if there's a no, I think is one of the areas that people need clarified. So let's talk about April 11th. The Belizeans we have decided no to going to the ICJ. What are the options on the table?
The options are the same options we've always had: negotiate, mediate, conciliate, and the rest of it. Look at Article 33 of the Charter of the United Nations, all of which we have tried. We could just go back and try them all over again. Those are
In
the
fact,
options.
I think you already covered this in your mapping of the Guatemalan claim, the 2007 moment when negotiations failed, the last one failed. And the ICJ option became the option that, in a sense, a bipartisan decision to seek this option pending a vote of the Belizean people.
Yeah.
We will be back, in a sense, at that point where the ICJ option, at least for the time being, has been taken off the table. And so we'll be asking ourselves, what next? And the advisory opinion option we just discussed.
But bear in mind that is not an option to settle disputes. It is not something that will settle it.
Right.
It will
I'm
just simply
I'm
won't.
saying it's an option that
It might
is
give us a nice moral
realistically
boost when we get the result of the opinion, but it does not settle the problem.
But clearly
So we
negotiations,
we have to be honest too. It is not an option to settle disputes. The options to settle disputes are listed in Article 33 of the Charter of the United Nations: negotiations, mediation, conciliation, and so forth.
In fact, I remember our legal advisors at some point in time had basically said that, yeah, that's possible, but you would get the same result as if you were to go for a legally binding opinion. And if you do so, I mean, would Guatemala, after seeing that, want to go for a legally binding opinion? So there are other considerations that people need to put in the mix in thinking about that option. And then that moves then to going back to the issue of negotiations, which of course will have to be considered after the results of the if there is a no vote. And I think factually, again, we go back to what has happened since 1962 and indeed since independence, where negotiations have always failed on the basic issue of we will never, no government, no people, no individual citizen consider giving up anything to Guatemala, be it land or rights. And Guatemala's constitution says Belize is part of Guatemala. So that impasse is very difficult to get out of. And we hear of people saying we have some creative ways of doing it, but it's a real fact that that has
And
been why
bear in mind, every other option would involve the neighbor as well. So it's not just us who would have to decide what next.
The
It would have to involve the neighbor too. If we want to negotiate but they refuse to negotiate, what will we do?
You know, one of the things
The problem is that things along the border are continuing. It's not like we're putting a stop to it. Whatever is happening along the border in the
But
South.
And
a
that's
ruling
another
from
sentiment.
the ICJ, we have heard very clearly from yourself, from the foreign minister, will not end
No, but
incursions either.
But what we're talking about, for example, we have the problems of the incursions on the Chiquibol and so forth.
yeah.
Of course, they have multiple reasons why those are happening, but one of them is the demarcation of the boundary, which would occur once we get a decision of the court. The next thing is the Sarstoon. The unfriendly behavior we're getting there would have to stop, because then once the decision comes, it will become clear for our neighbor, who right now tries to pretend that the whole river belongs to them. So a decision of the court will put a stop to that.
just by saying that, I could actually see our brother down south telling you that it is clear that that particular area is for us.
Of course, it is clear.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that their position, the neighbor's position, is that the whole river belongs to them, just like they have rights to the whole country. And that is what they use as an excuse to intimidate, harass, try to block our people from going there.
But all these things actually contribute to a lot of people being arrogant to the topic because of what's going on in those areas and for the fact that we are an independent and sovereign
I understand that.
country. Check me out. Yeah, because we're an independent and sovereign country. So why is nothing going on over there when we have complained already? One of the things that I wanted to get at was we've heard that our partners, our friends, our international friends would turn not only a blind eye at us, but probably get upset at the fact that we don't want to go to the ICJ if there is a no vote. So it came to mind, and we've got this injunction in court, and there is a possibility, because everything, you've got its possibility, that the referendum might be shoved on or probably to a later date. You guys as ambassadors, what happens then? Let's say this should happen. What happens then? Do we hear from the international partners saying, oh, you guys are wasting time again? What happens then? And I'm sure that people would want to know that as well.
I don't know that the international community would be upset at us. I mean, why would they be upset at us?
Not necessarily so upset,
Remember-
but the fact
remember-
that we
remember
might
whose
be
security-
wasting time, and they have already given us the blessing. you know?
Whose security we're dealing with is our security, you know. It's not their security, it's our security.
It is Belize that has gone out to the international community since 2007, asking for the international community to support the ICJ option pending the Belizean people voting yes. And we have put that, when you see all these resolutions from CARICOM and the Commonwealth and the ACP, it is Belize that has asked the international community for support for this possible option. So it's not the international community forcing us to do anything. But going back to your question, yes, I think that the international community will continue to support peaceful cooperation between Belize and Guatemala. The international community believes, as you would expect, that the ICJ option is the way to go when countries cannot settle a dispute. And so they will continue to urge that option, which is what our government and indeed Guatemala is saying we now want. So it's not like there's a forcing of it. So I think that we don't have too much to worry about the international community, except that some might be a little less patient in terms of where you're going next, what is your plan, and that will become clearer depending what happens after the 10th of April.
Well, I want to extract a question that you didn't get a chance to address, which is what happens if the injunction is allowed for in court? What is the plan currently?
The plan, the referendum unit continues to operate as we have to, that we have a referendum on the 10th of April. And the legal court before the case brought by the opposition is one that is being dealt with in the courts. We continue our job. That's a policy legal decision that is above our pay grade, and we move on with the work we are mandated to do. That is the short answer.
Bear in mind that this campaign, the public awareness campaign, is not something that just started last year, you know. It's something that has been going on for years. Mind you, in a very low level, hardly seen, and even up to not too long ago, people were complaining that they weren't hearing from us or seeing us enough, and now the opposite is true. Now they're saying they're hearing too much of us. But that's all right. The point is that the public awareness campaign continues until such time as the ICJ remains as an option. Then we have to keep doing that. And in fact, part of our mandate and part of what we were doing for some years now is to ensure that the information we have be included in the school curriculum. And so through the Ministry of Education, we had been working.
You would
with them on
accept,
that.
though, that we're late in the game in doing this?
Doing which part?
In including the Belize Guatemala dispute and our position in the education system.
I entirely agree with you. I'll tell you something. When I was in high school, a very personal anecdote, but I think it's shared by many Belizeans. When I was in high school, I wanted to take history, and I was not allowed to take Belizean history because I was taking too many other subjects. And they told me, no, you're too full, you can't handle anymore. So I had to go learn Belizean history on my own. I remember some summers I would spend time on the archives and do my own research, and every time I learned something new, I would get upset. Why didn't they teach us this?
Yeah.
And I think many Belizeans feel the same thing.
Sure,
And
same
it's the reaction we get when we're giving the presentations, isn't it? They say, why hadn't you thought of this? So you're right.
But from
entirely right.
2008 to now, I always find it fascinating that this is an afterthought right before the decision is made. It was never discussed
Yeah.
that
It
wasn't an
perhaps this could have.
afterthought. There is a new curriculum at the high school level that came out of some of the work done by the Advisory Council and the Guatemalan claimant urging this, where the new high school curriculum has a strong element of, and I think it's being now tested at the first round level, a strong element of this. So that's partly the result of this push over time. And even at primary school, there's some of this that is done. Clearly, it is not enough, and it wasn't done with enough time. I mean, since independence, we could have had that in the curriculum for, 5 years after.
Remember when we
independence,
went
10
into
years after
independence, we only had one history book by Narda Dobson, who never visited Belize. I mean, we were in a poor state then.
I mean,
And we
there's
still
a lot
have
of-
not fully advanced sufficiently, but now, I think little by little we're progressing in that.
No, and
direction.
I hear how it seems humorous, but it is actually
is
very,
very
very
serious.
sad.
It's very serious, yeah.
That we have taken so long to really advocate our own position
Exactly.
and inculcate it within our education system. So any
No.
adult who is voting at this point in time would have had, as Guatemala had for a long time with their claim in their education system, a solid understanding of the strength of our own establishment of our
But
sovereignty.
I think we give them a bit too much credit on that point. Why do I say that? Because in school they were taught Belize es nuestro, but they never went over the history, they never went over the law, they never went over the details of it.
Yeah, but
So-
that
so if you
sole
ask them-
message is sufficient
Right. It was a
to
slogan.
solidify generations of
Right.
Guatemalans to believe.
No, I
and
agree
having
with-
The opposite-
spoken
the
with
opposite-
I agree with you, but what
Guatemalans,
I'm
I know
saying-
this to be a fact.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is, you said that they were taught it and they understand it and they know why Guatemala claims this. And I'm saying that we give them too much credit because all they were doing is sloganeering. And then, of course, they internalized it and they kept repeating it. But you ask them how and why, they won't be able to explain
Well,
it to you. And even today, some of the treaties, some of the facts, they don't have. They
don't
would,
know.
I mean, very few people
And the
know of it.
converse is true for Belizeans. Every Belizean that we have encountered clearly believes that Belize is for Belizeans. There is no way it belongs to Guatemala, not one square inch.
Right.
And they have a general sense as to why. Clearly, we're saying more information could have been shared over time and education done. But that does not also take away from the fact that, at least in my post-independence experience, we have had the most intense education process over the past few months than we have ever had before in terms of getting Belizeans to understand this issue.
No, I want to go back because we're diverting a bit, and I wanted to follow up on the Sarstoon issue. It's clear that no matter what ruling comes out of the ICJ, if Belizeans decide to go that path, if we have the slam dunk case that has been predicted by those who are pushing for a yes
Based
vote.
upon these four things here.
The ruling says Belize is Belize as it exists. As I said before, none other than the foreign minister himself has said that will not stop incursions in Chiquibol or some of the challenges that we see even at the Sarstoon. So I want you to explain to me. The ICJ says 1859 treaty valid. We don't need to go any further. Belize is Belize as it exists. What physically changes at the board? What can be or will be done differently that we no longer have to wait for the OAS to come in, or we don't have to send a protest note instead of stopping and blocking people, the Guatemalans specifically, from coming into our territory and taking our resources?
Well, to begin with, in terms of implementation, the special agreement provides that Article 5, that 3 months after the court's ruling, boundary commission would be established with the support of the international community through the OAS, and they would start the demarcation of the boundary. Now, people confuse demarcation with delimitation. Demarcation simply means that you go out there and you properly mark the boundary. People have asked me that means you want to put up a fence like Mr. Trump tries to do with Mexico. I don't think that's the plan.
Is it like planting
what we're
coconut
doing,
trees or
not
clearing
really.
the border
The
like
point
the
is,
territorial volunteers?
we're going to
the
make
border.
sure that part of the
people
demarcation
know where it
process
is.
includes putting physical monuments that have a permanency so that you can't just go and pull it out or a cow and come and
More
chew
of
it,
them.
right?
100%.
So yeah, the plan is you get engineers, surveyors who do these things and they will properly mark it out. And that alone should take away one of the biggest excuses we get from people who are caught illegally in our territory, which is, I don't know where the border is, right? Because the truth is today, it is not fully marked or properly marked. We have border monuments, but not throughout the length of the boundary. So that is something that is part of the special agreement in terms of the implementation, and also not just the western border, but also the river and the sea would be.
I really want a more simplified answer than that, just so I think that we can understand.
But I
just
think
because,
all right, go ahead.
let me just use an example. May. No, well, you have to go beyond 3 months, right? So let's say in the end, December. The Belize territorial volunteers want to go to the Sarstoon Island with their Belizean flag, as they are allowed to do as Belizeans because it's Belizean territory.
Right.
And they encounter a boat with Guatemalan armed forces who tell them they cannot have access. What happens then?
What happens?
Yeah,
then?
what happens after we've gotten...
Bear in mind that the same thing, the going to the ICJ, if we vote yes now, it doesn't solve it now, you know.
Okay, after the ruling of the ICJ,
After the
after
ruling.
it's been
All right.
demarcated,
Well,
after
the
long
ruling.
term, we're talking 7 years, 8 years from now.
After the ruling, it's a different thing. Then, in terms of enforcement, then if our neighbor is not behaving the way it ought to behave, then we have resort to the Security Council to ensure that they give effect to the decision of the court, and that's part of the UN Charter.
So what you're
Which
saying
we don't
is-
have right now
What
in
you're
terms
saying
of
is,
the
I
international
just want to make
community.
sure I have it very clear. So if that were the scenario to unfold in the Sarstoon, we don't have our security forces who would essentially expel the Guatemalan armed forces out of our territorial waters as the ICJ would have claimed it. We would still have to go through a diplomatic process of going to the Security Council.
Clearly, we would attempt to do so, and if there is a confrontation, then that confrontation is one that would be resolved by us at the UN Security Council with the support of the international community that would abide by a final binding ruling of the ICJ, which we do not have now. So the international community is operating on a political declaration that is not legally binding. With an ICJ ruling, there is certainty that the international community and the UN will be able to say, Guatemala, you're wrong. Belize is right. And with that, it gives us a better opportunity to resolve these confrontations that happen not only on the Sarstoon, but also on the rest of the western border. And so it's the degree of certainty and recourse to enforcement that is very, very different from the current situation. And one of the things I think, Ambassador Rosado, that we should mention is that even if there's a yes vote, if Belizeans vote yes, in those first few months as the case begins, Belize will have the opportunity, if it so decides, to, in a sense, ask the court for an injunction on Guatemala's activities on the Sarstoon. That's like in any other case. And
they can provide that before the case even begins.
Yes.
And so that is
Wait,
something.
the case have to begin first. So that means we will have to register at the court first.
1 month after.
And then,
Okay.
But that is a recourse we will have. I mean, how the court will rule, we don't know, but there's a pretty good chance, based upon past experience, that the court could say Guatemala cease and desist all activities until this case is finished. That is a possibility for the Sarstoon, if there is a yes vote.
But is that how it would be, or would it be more of a no man's land where no Belize, you nor Guatemala go to the Sarstoon Island?
there's no such thing as a no man's land. It's either yours or ours, and that's
It's keeping
no
to
such
what has
thing
been
as a
established
no man's
practice,
land.
which is both sides have free access based upon the 1859 treaty to this river, without impediment from the other. That is what is agreed.
Now, I know that this is a question that you hear very often, and often it may seem trivial, but I think when you speak to Belizeans, the frustration they feel about seeing the incursions, about seeing what happens in Sarstoon, whether you've been there or not, nobody wants to see any bully come in to our own yard and say, no, you can't go, and we do nothing. I want to get your opinion on whether or not our response for more military forces, and I know you both work in diplomacy, and we have heard very often that this is simply an act of diplomacy, that we don't respond accordingly when we're being bullied. Do you feel that this has helped in making Belizeans feel comfortable in going another diplomatic route of going to the International Court of Justice?
Well, bear in mind that going to court is what you do when the other options have failed. It's not the first thing you do. Mind you, the British had foreseen what would happen if we tried the other options, because they said, look, if we continue negotiating and talking, we'll never reach an agreement. They said that from the 1930s.
Yeah.
So we're back to square one. I don't see that going the other options would change anything in terms of getting us closer to resolving the problem. Going to court is the way that will bring finality to it. In terms of the Sarstoon, going to court again will mark the boundary once the court rules, and also on the river and also on the sea. Bear in mind that we have problems at the sea too. A lot of illegal activities taking place there. Mind you, right now, like in terms of illegal fishing, a lot more of the illegalities come from Honduras in terms of the fishing. Towards the sea, closer to the land, you have the problem of the illegal fishing from Guatemala, but they keep closer to the land, so we see them more often.
Yes.
Farther out, you have the ones from Honduras.
And I would add to that clearly, and I don't agree with what you said, Marlene, that nothing is being done, because on a weekly basis, the BDF do patrol that border and going to the operating posts at Carenas. And the Guatemalans do trail, and there is aggression, but they're not stopped from doing it. It has never stopped.
They have stopped the territorial volunteers, though.
Stop the BTV.
They have stopped, and sometimes they do get through. So there is an aggression. What Guatemala is clearly trying to do is to establish facts on the ground. They're failing in doing that based upon our legal advice. In fact, and also we send diplomatic notes, which are very important in terms of they can be used in a court of law to show that Belize has never conceded and given up sovereignty. But Bassiani, Professor Stephen Bassiani, looked at this issue. He was asked by the bar. And in short, what he said was that nothing that is happening on the Sarstoon should cause Belizeans concern in how it would be viewed by the International Court of Justice because of these things that we've been doing. And he believes that this is not something that we should be worried about at all.
Let's take, if I may, just as an example of how we dealt with it. Remember, we had illegal settlements, and you're covering this in your program going back over the years. We had illegal settlements in the late 90s, 2000s, many of them, and we gave these people orders to leave. And there was tremendous pressure on the government of the day to get rid of them. Send the BDF, send the immigration, give them order to leave, and some of these people refused to leave. In fact, Santa Rosa flying our flag and teaching the curriculum, Guatemalan curriculum in the school. The government of the day was under tremendous pressure. Lots of noise out there. You have to. In fact, they used to, the same complaints they make of the administration today, they used to make of the administration then. Pressure was on the government. They were going to send the BDF to remove a small settlement. And then on the other side, plus the international community said, look, these people are unarmed civilians. You can't use military force on unarmed civilians. Otherwise, you start trouble. Despite the pressure, the decision of the day was, you know what, let's bring in the international community and take a patient, peaceful way of doing this. And eventually they were out, so that today there's no illegal settlement in Belize. There are, yes, people who come in illegally and stay a night or two, but there's no illegal settlement in Belize. So the manner by which we did it was effective. Of course, we're impatient people sometimes, and we want to see things done overnight.
I wanted to use that as a point. Luckily, I have seen the stories, so I know that the major difference was when, with Santa Rosa specifically, was the decision to execute or to expel them with the support of the diplomatic community, which extended the process, versus Machakila, where they went in with Simeon Sampson from Human Rights, who delivered the expulsion order, and it happened more rapidly. And I think that when you have the comparison of something being addressed quickly and then something that drags out for years and years, one seems like a better option than another. But we have to take a break. So I'm gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay tuned.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
Welcome back, and we're moving into segment 2 of the frequently asked question when it comes to the topic at B, the ICJ. Very healthy, because Belizeans actually are reckoning now what we're going through and where we need to go coming soon, actually. We had a very healthy discussion in segment 1, in the first part of things. And for segment 2, one of the things that I wanted to throw out, I think, and it's obvious out there, that things seems to be getting political. You've got a side saying yes, you've got a side saying no. As a matter of fact, there are political flags with no's on them as well. What do you think this will do, especially for voter turnout coming up on April 10th?
Voter turnout is a guessing game, isn't it? Mm-hmm. One thing I could be sure of is that Belizeans are interested, they are tuned in to the subject. Whether or not they have decided they will come out and vote is a different thing. Mm-hmm. And a campaign normally runs 1 month in Belize, so 2 weeks that is left for us is still a long time. I personally think that Belizeans will come out and vote on the day. How they will vote, I won't risk saying how they will vote, but I think people are interested, they are tuned in, they are passionate about the subject, and politics is something that we regret that gets in the way sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to realize it's part of our democratic existence. Belizeans tend to historically lean on one party or the other. Mm-hmm. There are other smaller parties around now. I think the important part of everything we're doing is that Belizeans are tuning in, they're discussing the issue, they understand the importance of the subject, and I hope that at the end of the day they would have gotten enough information in order to make a decision that is good for Belize.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I certainly see is, and this is across the board, as I do my presentations and listen to people, is that there is a national disappointment that we're not having a national approach to this issue, that it got into a sort of partisan, divisive aspect to some extent. And that's shared across, I think. There's a sense that, we should have not had this. And then the question of voter turnout, I mean, a lot of it will depend on what the political parties themselves do in terms of now having different positions in bringing out people to vote as they do in elections, and that is a bit unpredictable at this point because we have never been through a referendum standalone, separate from an election before. So some of this is still uncharted.
And we haven't been through a re-registration exercise in decades, and we haven't gotten, maybe you've gotten the final numbers for the eligible voters?
I don't have it.
No?
It seems to be creeping up to 70%, but not the final numbers.
70% of the previously registered list?
I think it's 70% of those who are eligible to vote. Yeah, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Which, compared to the last re-registration exercise at this point, is pretty much on track. If we were having a national election as opposed to a referendum, I would be able to almost bet that the numbers would have gone up quite.
Well, yeah, because people put their political machinery
Yes,
in play, and the investment is a bit more worth it for the political parties. But let me, and speaking of money, there's an issue that we have to address, and I want to ask you, Ambassador Rosado, because people are very concerned at the well-funded Citizens for the Defense of Sovereignty. It is glaring that they have big pockets, I should say that much. Can you tell me whether or not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Referendum Unit has provided any financial support, monetary or in kind, to CDS?
We have not, our office has not given CDS or anybody else any funding. What we have done is, for example, when we have a presentation somewhere, any part of the country, and they say, we want to hear from Assad Schuman, then we ask him if he would make himself available, and if he is, let's say he has to go to PG or Sokotsi was last weekend or 2 weekends ago, I can't remember. And if he needs to stay, then we would arrange for the cost of his hotel and so forth to get him there and back. But other than that, nothing else.
So he's still being provided that courtesy now?
When we ask him to do something for us. Other than that, he's on his own. I don't know what his schedule or what he does. But when we ask him to do something, we cover the expenses of, for example, if he needs to overnight in PG, we will pay the overnight in PG. That kind of thing.
Even after the breakaway as a separate NGO?
Yes, because it's our event, but people who are there are asking for him, so we asked for his.
And there were also.
One second. Is that courtesy extended also for the No campaign?
So yeah, well, if they are asked, if when we have presentation and say we want somebody, we would. When we're doing the lecture series, we had offered that to the peace movement, and they refused to accept us to cover for anything. But since then, we have had nobody ask us, please, could you bring somebody else?
Bring this one, bring that one.
Really, the ones that they've asked for is Assad Schuman.
So to be very clear, because this is a very touchy issue for Belizeans, you now, after CDS, the Yes campaign has been formed, have been providing assistance in terms of accommodation and travel for...
Only when he is doing something that we ask him to do,
Okay.
and that is a few times, not every day, every week, or anything like that.
And prior to the establishment of CDS, was he being paid by the Referendum Unit, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
No, not from the Referendum Unit. Foreign Affairs, I don't know, you'd have to ask. It's a different management. I don't handle Foreign Affairs, I handle Referendum Office.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could ask them.
Do you understand where these concerns are very legitimate? And you've heard it in forums, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I've heard it. I was asked before. So what you're asking me is not something that is new. I've been asked that, and I've answered that before.
Okay.
So I'm not surprised by the question, and I'm not giving you a different answer than I've given before.
Okay.
You were saying?
No, I was saying that what we're certainly aware of is the funding of the Referendum Unit itself, which has come from international funding agencies and some from the government, and that is all out there. And certainly in case of the UNDP, which I used to be at once, where some of the US and the UK funds have been going through, that process is totally transparent, and those funds have helped to fund the public awareness program of the Referendum Unit. But beyond that, I mean, we certainly don't have any other information of how the Yes campaigns or the No campaigns are getting their funds. That is something beyond the Referendum Unit's level of knowledge and information.
Well, the question has to be answered as people have their concerns regarding where their source of funding is coming from.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Referendum Unit, you know, there was money committed by the UK, there's money committed by the US, and you've also said that government has been putting in some money. What's your final tally in terms of expenditure so far? Estimate, if that's what you have.
Yeah, it has to be estimate. We had budgeted, they had budgeted for us 2.5 million. It's not the 8 or 9 million that I keep hearing out in the...
Well, because the Prime Minister had once said that he estimates it would be 9 million.
I don't know that the Prime Minister said that. What I know is that we submitted a budget request for that, and we got instead 2.5. And that would be expended, I expect, by the end of the year.
Well, I have the international figures. The UK is about 1.2 million that went through UNDP. The US about 500,000 that went through UNDP. And the EU also about 250,000 that they distributed directly. And they're small amounts, but this is all for the public awareness campaign aspect of it.
But we need to be clear that those monies from the international community does not come to government of Belize.
It goes to UNDP.
Those are handled by UNDP or by the OAS, not by us.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I wanted to get back to, you mentioned Ambassador Rosado, is the demarcation of the border. And you know, the reason why I go back to it is because I read a lot, I go a lot of places, and you hear these things. If, per se, the BTV, the Belize Territorial Volunteers would decide today, you know, a few days away from the referendum, you know what? We will go on out there and we will erect pillars at where they would decide to say, okay, this is the border point. Would we be in breach of anything right now, being that, especially where we are at this particular point?
If we are to be in breach of
in
something.
breach.
You know,
Are we able to do that as Belizeans? We are able to, okay, we're going to gather 200, 300 people. We'll go out to the borders and we will just put pillars that, you know what, our borders, because we've been given independence, you must have a border if you're to get independence.
But
and we will
please, let's be clear. We do have a border. It's not that, please don't
it's to demarcate.
assume or presume that we don't have a border. We have a border.
Yes.
So the matter is how properly marked it is. And you're saying somebody go there unilaterally and mark it.
Yes.
Now any surveyor will tell you that to properly survey any place, to draw a line of survey, you need to be able to triangulate and take your measurements from different parts. You can't just take from one angle. So to do a proper survey, you would need to enter Guatemalan territory.
Okay.
Any good surveyor will tell you that. And that's why, and as the ambassador said, international boundaries by definition require two countries to collaborate in its marking. You can't be done just by one. You could do it, it will be unilateral. So if in order for it to be properly done, you need both parties.
And the last time historically that there was demarcation done, 1861 and 1929, it was done by both the British and the Guatemalans together as an example of how these things are done. Clearly, Belize has tried to get Guatemala to work along with us to demarcate the borders, and for obvious reasons they have refused.
So and it's important to get it right. If it's going to be done, it's important to get it right. And if you go there by yourself and you put something, you run the risk of getting it wrong. And that's part of the...
It's not wrong to do it. I mean, there's domestically
Once you're in Belizean
rights,
territory, you should
but
be able to
the
go there.
considerations that were just expressed are there in terms of the other country not recognizing where that line is, and the surveying considerations that were mentioned.
I want to move the conversation forward is looking at the continued campaign in getting people to decide whether or not to go to the ICJ. And I believe it may have been your last appearance here, Ambassador Rosado, where you said that the government was working to get the legal representatives to make a presentation in country before the vote. It's the 11th hour.
It's the 11th
Maybe
hour.
11:30 at that.
Well, you know, I was so happy to get the opinion from Professor Bassiani, commissioned by the Bar Association. And the opinion, well, we know the conclusions already. And last Friday, the Bar organized a conference call, and they had it at the Bliss. And I think, I don't know how the turnout was, but the point is that it was there, and I understand they were going to put it on their website as well to be available to everybody. We are still trying to get an international lawyer to give us something. So you have to wait for that. It will come. It will come.
Well, two things. A legal opinion is a legal
Before the
opinion,
referendum,
and I think Lisa Schumann had told us that, in fact, the government had gotten the legal opinion on the constitutionality of the special agreement. That hasn't been publicized, I'm assuming, because it's in court. But I think I'm not asking about a legal opinion on the case, because you're right, we have Professor Bassiani's. I'm asking if the people who will represent this country in court, if Belize decides to go to the ICJ, will address them before they make that decision. Representatives from Freshfields, which I believe we are already paying in terms of the research and the work that they're doing right now.
Well, I should
Am I wrong?
clarify that the research, a lot of it has been done.
But they're on retainer, are they?
Yes, they
Okay.
are. They're available for us.
Okay.
We're not paying them just to be there for us. I think I need to clarify that too.
Okay.
They're there for us when we ask them to do a job for us. They bill us for it, of course, but we're not paying them just to be there on standby for us.
Okay.
Also, we have been doing research continuously, led right now by Dr. Bird, the head of the Archives Department.
Okay.
That's in addition to all the previous research that has been done for years.
Mostly on effective occupation over time since
Yeah.
the 1790s until today.
Yeah.
So I just thought I should clarify that bit, that it's not the role of the lawyers to do the research for us.
Okay.
And then the next thing is that the lawyers, we have been in touch with them. We wanted to bring one of them, but for practical reasons, we could not get him. At least we have not pinned down a date. But we are getting somebody to come, or somebody to make themselves available for us. We're
Before
still working on
referendum.
that. We're still working on that.
Yeah. So what is the likelihood that the lawyers who, if we vote yes, may represent us at the ICJ, will have a consultation, a presentation, a Q&A with the Belizean public or media before the referendum?
Yeah, we're still working on that. So
What's the
it's
likelihood?
likely. I would say it's very likely, but I don't have a date to give you, so
Yeah.
I don't want to say that it'll happen on such and such a time.
Okay.
We're working on it, definitely.
Being that you guys have been across the country, like we mentioned previously, where do we find the more people who are actually much more active in asking the questions? Up in the north, down south, where do we find these things? And I ask it because, you know,
The more
answer.
spirited
yes, the
conversation.
more spirited conversations, the people who are really into this thing. And
God,
I don't want to say aggressively asking you guys questions about the ICJ and the referendum on a whole.
Honestly, I find it everywhere. Everywhere in Belize you go, you find different concerns, different points of views. One thing that I think is common across Belize is people passionate about their country. And really, it gives me personally a lot of what you call it, sense of nationalism.
Yeah.
That we know it's there, but you feel it when you're actually down on the ground and meeting with the people all across the country. It doesn't matter what language they speak, what their ethnicity is. Everywhere in Belize you find that, and that is exhilarating, being a part of this process.
You know, a lot of Belizeans share your sentiment in terms of history in our country. And we're so into it because, like you mentioned, we're so passionate about our country and what goes on and what's going on now and what we should expect. So if the referendum is supposed to be pushed back, the date, you know what? We need to push back this date. The referendum unit, will we continue on this aggression in terms of getting people informed?
Aggression.
Getting people informed.
Intensity of the...
Yes, the intensity. And it's aggressive. We're everywhere, which is good. Will we see this?
I think that's a political decision. The government will decide, and I think it will have to do with people's demand for it too. The more people want to hear about it, I think government would have to make a decision. As it is right now in the budget that is being debated, I think they have about 100,000 or 200,000 budgeted for the referendum office. If the demand is there, people will call in their representatives and the government, and maybe it'll be increased. I don't know. But it's a political decision.
Yeah. If there's a yes or no vote, I mean, some education will continue. Clearly, if there's a no vote and we don't have a referendum for a while or a long time, you could expect that there's going to be a slowdown in intensity and perhaps focusing more on what we were saying about the educational system and getting that perhaps more comprehensively done. But the nature of campaigns is that intense moments last 6 months, last 3 months, so when you have most activity. And that's when, of course, it is also more expensive. So one would expect that it all depends on what happens and dates, how we answer that question.
Okay. So before we wrap up this segment, I wanna go through an exercise as we spoke about earlier. There are a lot of people out there that are undecided, and I find that because I encounter people on a daily basis who ask me how they should vote, which I will never tell them what to do. People need to go through a decision-making process, and we need a simplified pros and cons for each side. Now, as the referendum unit putting forward the facts on all possibilities, I want us to go through this exercise. What are the pros of voting yes to going to the ICJ? Give me 3 points if we can simplify it.
3 points. We have the case before the court based upon a legal decision that we have always wanted to go to court on, and not on fairness. We have Guatemala in a position where they've agreed to do that. It's a moment in history that, based upon all the legal opinions we have, and I say all, that we will have a very good chance of winning the case. In fact, the solidness, and if we looked at each point in 38.1 of our arguments on each, tells us that Belize will win the case. And I think Vassiani just said that last week Friday when he was asked point blank. And he says, at the end of the day, I agree with Lothar Paquetol that Belize will win the case based upon its arguments and its claims.
So the pro is Belize will win the case of voting yes.
Yes.
That's 1 point. And I
That's
think that's
for three,
a pretty good. That's a pretty
I think
good.
the important thing. You want to go ahead?
No, you can.
No, I was just going to say that it'll settle the dispute, as the ambassador said. It will clearly mark the boundary, the entire boundary. And third, it will allow us, because the dispute will be behind us, it will allow Belize and Guatemala to work better together, to collaborate in order to stem the problems that we have occurring in the border, like the encroachments, like the deforestation, and that kind of thing, because our authorities will be able to then cooperate much better than they are able to do.
All right. Still in the decision-making process, I need to go through the cons list. What are the cons of voting yes? 3 points.
The cons of voting yes?
Yes. Yeah.
You want to...
The cons of voting yes.
Well, when you make I don't know how you make a decision, but I look at what there is to gain and what there is to lose.
I mean, it's not one of the areas that we deal with as sharing the facts, but I mean,
what are the possibilities?
I can tell you that a couple concerns that I hear of people, it's going to be expensive, and where will the money come from? And some people are concerned about that. One of the responses is there's a comparative cost analysis. How much has this cost us since independence and continue to cost us? Is that a short-term cost? But it's a question. There is the common question that comes up, how can we trust these 15 judges that to decide a case for us, and factually we go back to the independence and impartiality of the ICJ over time, the strength of past cases in the context of Belize. So we basically...
So you're saying pros in the dispute, demarcating our border, building better relationship with Guatemala. Cons, it'll be costly. We're entrusting the decision in 15 ICJ judges. Is there one more con you can share with us?
Maybe you can help us with that.
No, you are the referendum unit commissioned to give me all the information as a voter.
But I'm giving you the facts. Our task is to give you the facts. You are the one who has to weigh the facts against your own biases, your own prejudices, your own feelings. I mean, emotion is something that is you can't really deal with emotion in the sense that it's a fact. I mean, you feel it. Yes. I can't hold you wrong for feeling something. I can help you to understand how you feel is based on facts and evidence and so forth, but I can't speak for how you feel.
No, I had no reference to my feelings, only the fact that I want facts from you. What
So
are
then-
pros and
so
cons?
then help us.
That's-
So help us.
My feelings are irrelevant.
I think
this
it's
is what-
a good way to look at this is to say what we hear people saying in terms of their concerns, if there's a yes. And we might not share those concerns or speak to those concerns as the referendum office, but we respond to them. And I mean, another is, would Guatemala abide by the ruling, even if we get, as our lawyers say, that we will, a win at the ICJ? And again, when we get that, we answer factually that we have recourse eventually to the United Nations Security Council for enforcement. So it is responding to the questions of concern that people validly have about this issue. And at the end of the day, you said something very important, that every Belizean will need to, in a sense, do their own risk analysis based upon all these facts and say, well, is it, for me, a decision that I want to make to vote yes or no based upon all these facts I know?
One of the just to throw in there, I think one of the things that we've been hearing in terms of a con of voting yes is from voting yes to a sound decision from the ICJ, which would take a span of what, 5-7 years, somewhere around there. This is what folks are saying, would be that businesses would be heavily reluctant to branch off because they're not sure as to what the decision is going to be. So in terms of development in the country, this is what folks are saying.
But that pertains right now. I mean, there is uncertainty with the Guatemalan claim period as to what could happen. And the ICJ option, if there's a yes vote, the legal advisors and opinions, indeed the government is saying it will bring more legal certitude to our border, which...
That's the whole point of the option, no? Of going to court, to bring legal certainty.
In the context of economic opportunities, will bode well for planning long-term and in the future.
I just have one final question, at least for me. Guatemala is getting ready for their election. What is the impact of any political shift that will take place? Well, there will be a political shift in the election of the new president? What does it mean for this process?
Well, it depends how the referendum fares out. If we get a yes, the court process begins within a month of referendum day. So by May 10th, we would have registered our yes at the ICJ. Guatemala has already written to the ICJ saying we submit to the jurisdiction of the court, pending whatever decision Belizeans make. So we get a yes, we write to the ICJ saying we have gotten a yes. So now the case begins. It's already registered in the ICJ, and there's no Guatemala then. Whatever happens in their election cannot affect what is happening in the court, because once the court process begins, they can't back off. You see?
So you're saying there's absolutely no way that no matter who is elected as a Guatemalan, as the next Guatemalan president, can say, you know, we don't want to go this route anymore.
Once the court process has begun, now, if we say no, or for whatever reason we don't have our referendum, Guatemala decision could change, because we have not bound them in the sense that they wrote, but pending our decision. And until we make a decision, they could, we're speculating, but we don't know what the next government of Guatemala would do. It's possible that they could try to walk back everything we have achieved so far. It's possible, we don't know. We get a yes, they can't walk it back, it's already there.
All right.
So really, uncertainty would follow if we don't get a firm decision anytime soon.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for coming in and answering our questions. We I think, touched on a lot of different topics.
There's so much more we could cover.
Oh, there is so much more, and you have almost 2 weeks to reach out to all corners to be able to get to people.
Yes.
But
Thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to be here.
Thanks
All right.
indeed.
we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, talking about how proud we are of Belize, we're going to be looking at a story of the Belize Protectors who recently won first place at the Bakers to Vegas competition. Please stay tuned.